Kira stood alone near the edge of the glowing crystal lake, her reflection broken by ripples in the water. Her tall frame, silver blue skin, and sharp amber eyes made her different from the other girls in her village, but not in a way that others liked. Her species, the Varelli, valued softness, grace, and beauty that fit their ancient standards. Small features, soft voice, gentle body, those were the marks of a perfect bride. Kira was the opposite. She was strong, with broad shoulders and powerful arms. Her voice was steady and quiet, and her presence made some uncomfortable. From childhood, Kira had been told the same thing again and again. You are not breeding material. The words echoed in her mind every time she passed a mirror, every time a gathering was called, and the girls lined up for selection. And she was ignored. The families of young males came with gifts, choosing brides based on beauty and bloodline. Kira was always the last one standing. The girl no one picked. Some laughed, some pitied her, but most just looked away. She had learned to live in the background. Like a shadow among stars, she tried just once to speak up during a matchmaking event. She stepped forward, wearing a hand-woven dress and soft paint on her skin. But the elder male only frowned and said loudly, "She looks like she belongs in armor." Not in a nursery. The others laughed, and she walked away, her cheeks burning. That was 3 years ago. And since then, she stopped trying. Kira found peace in silence. She drew pictures in the dust, carved shapes into stone, and watched the stars pass by. Her world was quiet, predictable, and painfully lonely. Then one day, a message arrived from the capital. The Varelli Council had approved a small diplomatic mission. A human commander from Earth was arriving, and the council needed someone to act as a translator and assistant. Kira's parents did not hesitate. They volunteered her name quickly, not with pride, but with relief. It was a way to send her away just for a while. "Maybe the humans won't care what you look like," her mother said softly, trying to sound kind, but the meaning cut deep. So, Kira packed her things, wrapped her long white hair into a braid, and left for the human landing zone. She expected nothing. Just another assignment where she would stay quiet, do her job, and return unnoticed. The human ship landed with a soft hum, sleek and silver like a fallen comet. Kira stood among the alien officials, her face calm, but her heart pounding fast. Then he stepped out, Commander Jake Morgan. He wore a black uniform with small silver emblems on his chest. His eyes were deep green, and his walk was confident, but not arrogant. He scanned the group, shook a few hands, then turned to Kira. Their eyes met, and he smiled. "Hi," he said, in clear Varelli tongue. "You must be Kira." She blinked, surprised that he had learned her name. She nodded slowly. "Yes, you have very clear eyes," he added, looking straight at her, like the sunrise on Titan. Kira froze. Her face went blank, her mind racing. No one had ever complimented her eyes before, not even once. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She didn't know how to answer. Jake just smiled again and turned to the council. But the words stayed in her mind, clear eyes, like sunrise, later that day. When she returned to her small guest chamber, she sat on the bed and stared at her reflection in the mirror. For the first time, she looked into her own eyes, not with shame, but curiosity. What did he see? She wondered. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her thoughts ran wild. Was it a joke? Was it just something humans said to be polite? Or did he mean it? The next morning, Jake greeted her with the same calm smile. He asked how she slept, if she liked the human food, and what she thought of his ship. No one had ever asked her opinion before. Not seriously. And when she told him she enjoyed sketching during free time, he said, "I'd love to see your work." Kira felt a strange warmth in her chest. She didn't understand it yet, but something was changing. For the first time in her life, someone saw her, not her status, not her failure to be chosen, but her, the girl no one chose. But maybe that was about to change. Kira stood beside the human commander as they walked through the wide marble halls of the Alien Council building. Her steps were quiet, practiced, like someone trying not to be noticed. But Jake noticed everything. He was not like the other aliens she had met. His eyes didn't judge. They didn't search her body for flaws. Instead, they held calm curiosity, like he actually wanted to know her, not weigh her worth. "So," Jake said as they walked, "do you like working with your people's council?" Kira blinked. No one had ever asked her such a thing before. She thought for a second and replied, "I'm not important to them. I'm just a translator." Jake laughed softly. "Important enough to stand beside me all day," he said. "That must count for something." She looked down. Hiding a small smile that tried to escape her lips, her heart beat a little faster. Not from fear, but from something new, something warm. The other alien officials noticed it too. How the human paid attention to Kira. They whispered among themselves. Shaking their heads, one even chuckled and said under his breath, "That human must be blind." Kira heard it. Her chest tightened. She expected Jake to laugh too, to agree, but he didn't. Instead, Jake turned to the alien and said calmly, "Blind? No. I think I see just fine." The alien's smirk faded, and he said nothing more. Kira looked at Jake in surprise. Her hands curled at her side, trying to hide the way they trembled, not in fear, but in something close to hope. Later, while they waited for the next meeting, Jake sat across from her at the long silver table. He leaned back and stretched his arms, then asked, "What do you do when you're not translating for important guests like me?" Kira hesitated. She had always kept her hobbies hidden, afraid they'd be mocked. She finally said, "I draw, sometimes when I have time." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Draw? Like art?" She nodded slowly. "Mostly ships, places I see in. My dreams, faces I remember." He smiled wide. "That's amazing. Do you have any with you?" Kira hesitated again, then pulled a small folded sheet from her satchel. She unfolded it carefully and placed it in front of him. It showed a massive starship flying low over an alien sea, its engines glowing against a twilight sky. Jake studied it in silence for several seconds. Then he looked up at her with real admiration in his eyes. "You did this?" Kira nodded. "This is beautiful," he said. "You've got serious talent." Her eyes widened. She had heard many things about herself, but never those words. Not from anyone. Not ever. "Where I come from," Jake continued, "people like you are called visionaries." Visionary. The word echoed in her chest like a bell. No one had ever called her anything like that before. That evening, she returned to her room with her sketchpad clutched tightly in her arms. For the first time, she added color to her next, drawing bright blues and warm golds. She didn't care if it looked perfect, she just wanted it to feel alive. But not everyone liked the change. The next morning, 2 young alien females passed her in the hallway. One of them smirked and whispered loud enough to hear, "Maybe she thinks a human will breed with her." The other giggled, as if he'd ever want something like that. Kira lowered her head. She should have expected this. She was rising too fast, breaking the rules of invisibility that had kept her safe. Later that day, Jake noticed she was quiet. He asked, "Did something happen?" She shook her head, not wanting to bother him with gossip and cruelty. But Jake wasn't fooled. "Look," he said, leaning closer. "I know how people are. I've seen it back home, too. They fear what they don't understand, and sometimes they just can't accept someone being different." Kira looked at him. "I don't belong anywhere," she whispered. Jake smiled. "You belong with people who see you not just your outside, but your strength, your mind, your art, and trust." "Me? Those people exist." She didn't know how to answer, so she just nodded. Her heart felt heavy and light at the same time. That night, she added another drawing to her pad. A human and a Varelli walking under a shared sky. Two different figures, side by side. Not the same but equal. Kira still didn't understand what was happening, but she knew one thing. Jake didn't see her the way others did. He looked at her hand. He actually saw her, and that was something she never expected. The next morning, the halls of the council building buzzed with low voices and clicking boots. Kira walked quietly behind Jake. Her sketchpad safely tucked under her robe. She hadn't shown it to anyone else, only him. Jake had requested a tour of the cultural wing of the building. A place most humans never cared to visit, but he seemed different, curious about alien art. History and music. Inside, glowing scrolls floated above pedestals. Ancient Varelli statues stood tall and elegant, all showing the same soft-featured figures that Kira could never match, but Jake seemed unimpressed. "This is what your people praise?" he asked gently. "They're all the same." Kira gave a small nod. "Perfection here means being like everyone else." Jake chuckled. "That sounds boring." They stopped at a glass case filled with old ceremonial paintings. One showed a bride surrounded by gifts, her eyes lowered, expression blank. Kira stared at it in silence. "I want to show you something better," Jake said suddenly. Kira looked at him, confused. He reached toward her satchel. "May I?" he asked. She hesitated, then handed him the sketchpad. Her heart pounded. She thought he would look at it in private, not here, not in front of others. Jake walked to the center of the gallery and placed the sketchpad gently on a display table. A few aliens nearby turned to see what he was doing. "This," Jake said, tapping the open page, "is what art looks like when it comes from the heart." On the page was a scene of two moons rising over a misty cliff. A human ship sat beside a Varelli tower, joined by a single glowing bridge. The colors were deep and emotional. The lines soft but full of power. At first, there was silence. Then, one alien curator stepped closer, frowning. "Who created this?" he asked. Jake pointed at Kira, who stood frozen by the wall. Eyes wide, "She did." Jake replied, "Her name is Kira." The curator blinked. This came from her." Kira nodded slowly, her hands trembling. She expected the usual mockery. Rejection, maybe silence, but something different happened. Another alien approached, then another. Soon a small crowd formed around the sketchpad, studying each page as Jake flipped through them one by one. A Varelli diplomat whispered, "These show emotion, not just form." A warrior in uniform muttered, "She has vision." Kira couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her drawings, once hidden and ashamed, were being praised by people who never even looked at her before. But not everyone was impressed. In the back of the room, two young Varelli nobles crossed their arms. One of them sneered, "What good is art from someone who can't even attract a mate?" Jake turned sharply. "Where I come from, we don't measure someone's value by who wants to breed with them." The room fell quiet. The insult hung in the air. "Oh." But Jake didn't stop. "She's an artist, a protector, and one of the smartest people I've met on this planet," he said. "If you can't see that, the problem isn't with her, it's with you." Kira's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever defended her like that, not even her own family. After the crowd thinned, the curator returned and handed the sketchpad back to Kira. "If you ever wish to display your work officially," he said, "come see me." She nodded, barely managing a word. Her legs felt weak, her chest full of something she couldn't explain. Was this what pride felt like? Outside the gallery, she sat alone on a low bench, staring at the clouds above. Then Jake sat beside her, not saying anything at first. Finally, he asked, "How are you feeling?" Kira looked at him, her voice quiet, like I'm floating. Jake smiled. "Good. Because you deserve it." She shook her head. "I'm not used to people saying things like that." "Get used to it," Jake replied. "You're not invisible anymore." For a long moment, they just sat there, side by side, a human and an alien. Two different worlds, but somehow, in that moment, they were the same. Kira reached for her sketchpad and turned to a blank page. With slow, thoughtful strokes, she began to draw not a starship, not a tower, not a battlefield. She drew a human hand reaching out to an alien one. Meeting in the center of a glowing light, she smiled as she drew, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't drawing from dreams, she was drawing from something real. The sun was high above the Varelli capital when the council invited the human delegates to a peace summit in the open sky garden. It was a floating platform made of transparent crystal, suspended by anti-gravity pillars over a deep valley of trees and mist. The air shimmered with light, the perfect scene for a perfect event. Kira stood beside Jake, holding her translation tablet. She wore a ceremonial robe of soft blue, gifted by the cultural curator after her artwork had been praised for the first time in her life. She didn't feel like hiding. Jake looked around. The floating platform, you guys like building things high up, he joked. Kira smiled slightly. It's supposed to show power and elegance. Well, it's beautiful, Jake said. But I hope it's stable. Kira gave a small laugh. Not knowing how real his words would soon become, the council meeting began. Varelli leaders and human officers took turns giving speeches about peace, trade and trust. Kira translated each word smoothly, standing with confidence she had never shown before. But just as the Varelli High Elder began his final speech, a strange vibration moved through the platform. At first, it was gentle, like a wind, then it grew stronger. The crystal beneath their feet began to flicker. Kira noticed it first, her eyes scanning the far pillars holding the platform in place. One of them was blinking red. Something's wrong, she whispered to Jake. He looked where she pointed, then tapped his wrist communicator. Command, this is Commander Morgan. I'm detecting instability in the west anchor. Confirm immediately. Before an answer came, a loud crack echoed through the air. One of the anti-gravity pillars sparked, and a section of the platform tilted. People screamed as they stumbled. Several diplomats fell to the ground, trying to hold on. Kira grabbed Jake's arm as the platform shook again, more violently this time. Evacuate! Shouted one of the human officers. A metal railing snapped, flying across the floor, heading straight toward Jake. In a split second, Kira moved. She pushed Jake out of the way and threw herself on top of him. Her back took the brunt of the impact. As the railing hit and bounced off, her body shielded him completely. The force knocked them both to the floor. Jake looked up in shock. Kira, are you all right? She nodded weakly, pain flashing in her eyes. Her shoulder was bleeding, her robe torn, but she stayed calm. We have to help the others, she said, trying to stand. Together, they moved to assist the council members and delegates, guiding them toward the emergency escape lifts that slowly rose from the platform edges. Jake supported Kira, who limped but never stopped moving. Soon, everyone was off the unstable platform just before it finally cracked and fell into the mist. Below, the news spread across the Varelli system within hours. Floating council platform collapses. Translator saves human commander. Unlikely hero prevents tragedy at the hospital. Kira sat quietly with her arm in a support brace. Jake sat beside her, his uniform torn, his face serious. I owe you my life, he said simply. You would have done the same. She replied, maybe, he said, but you actually did it. Kira, you acted without thinking, without waiting, you saved people. The next day, the council gathered again, this time on solid ground. They gave speeches of thanks, honors, and promised safety improvements. But when it came time to recognize Kira, something strange happened. They hesitated. She is a translator, one elder said, not a soldier, not a protector. Another murmured, giving her recognition may send the wrong message about roles. Jake stood and faced them directly. If saving lives is not a role worth recognizing, then your values are broken, he said. She didn't ask for attention, she earned it. There was silence, then slow agreement, finally. They called Kira forward and gave her a silver medal, the Guardian's Mark. A rare honor never before given to someone of her rank or status. But for Kira, the medal didn't matter as much as what Jake said next. In front of everyone, he placed the medal around her neck and whispered, "That wasn't just bravery. That was you, proving what I already knew: you're strong, more than anyone ever gave you credit for." Kira felt tears rise, but blinked them back, not out of shame, but pride, that night. As she sat in her room looking at the medal, she thought about everything. The old insults, the years of being ignored, the cruel laughter, and how one moment of action changed everything. She was no longer just the girl no one chose. She was now someone others looked up to. But deep in her heart, she still wondered. Had people truly changed, or were they just surprised? Jake's voice echoed in her mind, strong and clear. You were always more than they said. And now, finally, she was starting to believe it too. The ceremony hall was filled with strange silence, not the kind that came from peace, but from shock. Eyes followed Kira as she stood in the center, her tall frame wrapped in silver blue robes, the Guardian's medal shining proudly on her chest. She didn't look nervous anymore. She looked ready. Jake stood beside her with a proud expression on his face. He wasn't wearing his usual black command uniform today. Instead, he wore Earth's ceremonial white, clean and simple, but with power in every thread. The Varelli High Elder stepped forward and began to speak, praising the bond between their species, honoring the humans for their bravery, and briefly mentioning the role Kira played in saving lives. Jake's eyes narrowed. He waited until the elder finished speaking, then gently stepped up to the podium. The room quieted again. He looked at Kira, then at the crowd. I know it's tradition to speak of leaders, of warriors, of peace deals signed, Jake began. But today, I want to speak about something far more powerful: one person's courage. People leaned forward, curious, unsure of where this was going. Before I ever set foot on this planet, Jake continued, I read reports about the Varelli way of life. I read about breeding status, value ranks, traditions that decide who's worthy and who isn't. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. And then I met Kira, he said, turning toward her, a woman who was told she wasn't worthy. Not because she lacked skill or courage, because she didn't fit someone else's idea of beauty. Gasps filled the room, even a few murmurs of disagreement. But Jake didn't stop. She saved me, he said. She saved diplomats. And more than that, she showed what real strength looks like. He turned to her again and added, in a clear voice that carried across the hall, you're not just breeding material, Kira. You're someone I would proudly call a partner. The room went completely still. For a moment, even the air seemed frozen. Kira's breath caught. Her chest rose slowly as she tried to understand what he had just said. Her cheeks flushed, not from shame, but something unfamiliar and overwhelming. Being truly seen, the elders whispered among themselves. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others simply stared. Their precious system had been challenged in front of every guest and diplomat. But someone clapped, then another joined, and another. Soon, the hall echoed with applause. Some still held back, unsure, unwilling to accept change, but the wave had begun. Kira looked at Jake, her lips parting to speak, but no words came. Just a smile, wide and real. The first of its kind she had ever given in public. Later that day, she walked through the city alone. Citizens now looked at her with wide eyes, not with pity but wonder. Children whispered to each other, pointing and saying, that's her. She passed a shop window and saw her reflection, not hiding, not shrinking. Her long braid hung over her shoulder, her robe catching the sunlight like a hero's cloak. But not everything had changed. In a quiet corridor, 3 alien males stepped into her path, tall and bitter-faced. One spoke coldly. "So now you think you're special, just because a human picked you." Kira stood still. "I didn't ask to be chosen," she said softly. "I just stopped hiding." Another sneered, "He'll leave. You know, he'll return to his world, and you'll be alone again." She looked at them calmly. "I've always been alone," she said. "But now I know I'm still worth something." They laughed. But there was tension in their eyes. Fear, maybe fear that the system was breaking. Later, back at her quarters, Jake waited by her door, holding something. Behind his back, "I have something for you," he said with a grin. He handed her a small case. Inside was a communicator made from both human and Varelli tech. It was sleek, silver, and had her initials engraved. "For when I leave," Jake said, "so you can contact me anytime, anywhere." Kira held it gently, her fingers brushing the symbol carved on the front. "You're still going?" she asked quietly. "Soon," Jake nodded, "but only for a while." Kira nodded too, accepting it. "And when you return?" Jake smiled. "I'll bring you to Earth. Let them see the artist, the protector, the woman who changed everything." Kira looked out at the stars, her heart steady. His compliment hadn't just made her blush, had set her free. Now, the galaxy was watching, and she no longer feared being seen. The days after the ceremony were filled with whispers. Some called Kira a hero. Others called her something far more dangerous. An example. Young alien girls began sketching in the corners of classrooms, whispering about strength, not beauty, and that frightened the old order. Behind the shining towers and peaceful speeches, jealousy grew like rot in the dark corner of a training arena. 3 young Varelli males gathered. Each one had once been praised for his looks, for his rank, for his family's name. But now, their eyes were filled with anger. "She was no one," growled the tallest, "and now she walks like a queen." "A human did this," the second one spat. "He gave her attention, and now the others follow." The third narrowed his eyes. "We can remind her of her place." That night, Kira left the council archives late, carrying 2 books and her sketchpad. Her robes fluttered behind her in the soft night breeze as she walked alone through the outer gardens. She liked the quiet there, liked how the stars looked down without judgment. But she wasn't alone. She heard a noise behind her, turned, and saw shadows move. Before she could react, they surrounded her. "You forgot where you came from," one said coldly. Kira stayed calm, holding her ground. "I didn't forget anything," she replied. I just stopped believing your lies." That angered them. The tallest stepped forward. "You think you're better than us now? Because a human smiled at you." Kira's eyes didn't flinch. "No, I don't think I'm better. I think I'm finally free." They moved quickly, expecting her to panic, to beg. But Kira didn't run. She dropped her books and raised her arms, not in fear, but in stance. Jake had taught her simple human combat for self-defense. Not to hurt, just to stop. The first attacker lunged, and she sidestepped him easily, grabbing his arm and flipping him to the ground. The second tried to grab her shoulder, but she twisted, using his own weight to throw him off balance. The third managed to strike her side, but she didn't fall. She spun and landed a single precise hit to his knee, making him drop. Within seconds, they were all on the ground, groaning, humiliated. Kira stood over them, breath steady. Her hands were scraped, her side ached. But her heart burned with fire. "I won't be silent again," she said. "If you attack me, I'll defend myself, and if you insult me, I won't believe you." She turned and walked away, leaving them there in the garden dirt. Just as a group of council guards arrived, having been alerted by hidden cameras. The next morning, the story spread fast. Unarmed female defends herself against 3 noble males. The council tried to keep it quiet, but humans had already shared the footage with Earth's media on human channels. She wasn't just news, she was a symbol. A woman who had been called nothing, now standing tall, not just with words, but with action. Jake met her that morning, his eyes wide. "You all right?" Kira nodded. "They wanted to scare me," she said. "But they only reminded me why I keep standing." He grinned. "I think you might scare them now." Later that day, Jake was called into a high-level meeting. Kira waited outside, unsure of what the council was planning next. When he returned, his expression was unreadable. "They offered you a post," he said. Kira blinked. "What?" "They want you to join the Earth-Varelli Joint Alliance program," he said, "to train." As a diplomatic protector and cultural artist, her heart skipped. "Is this real?" Jake nodded. "They're too proud to admit it, but they need someone like you. Someone who speaks both languages, words, and actions." Kira looked at her hands, still bandaged from the night before. Then she looked at Jake. "I'll accept," she said softly, "not because they finally see me, but because I finally see myself." As she walked through the corridors later that evening, Varelli citizens stepped aside, not in disgust, but in respect. Little girls looked up at her with bright eyes, and for the first time, she saw herself reflected in hope, not shame. The jealous ones had tried to drag her back down. But Kira was done living on the ground. She had stood, fought, and chosen to keep walking forward, no longer just the girl no one wanted. Now, she was a name that echoed through both worlds. Her journey was far from over. The sky above the launch terminal burned soft orange as the sun dipped behind the Varelli peaks. Kira stood at the edge of the platform. Her new uniform pressed and perfect. Her silver blue armor shimmered with gold-trimmed symbols of Earth Varelli. Unity, her badge read. Cultural Officer Kira Velinarsh never thought her name would be worn like a title. But now, it was. Behind her, humans and Varelli walked side by side, loading cargo. Preparing for the long journey to Earth, she wasn't going as a servant, or a translator, or a bodyguard. She was going as herself. Jake approached, carrying 2 bags and wearing his familiar black commander's coat. "Ship's ready," he said with a smile. "Are you?" Kira looked at the vessel, sleek, strong, humming with life. Her heart beat fast, not from fear, but from something bigger. Something she had waited for all her life. "Yes," she said simply. "I'm ready." They walked together toward the boarding ramp. Every step felt heavy with memory. The years of silence, the cruel words, the loneliness, now all behind her. Suddenly, she stopped and turned to face the city one last time. The towers, the gardens, the paths where she once walked. With her head down, now, she stood tall. "Will they remember me?" she asked softly. Jake stood beside her, looking out. "They already do," he said. "You didn't just break their rules, Kira. You rewrote what it means to matter." Her eyes stung for a second, but she blinked it away, not from sadness, but from something too big for tears. On the ship, her quarters were small but beautiful. A desk waited for her drawings, and a data screen showed messages from humans eager to meet her. Her story had reached Earth before she did. Jake entered after a while, holding 2 cups of Varelli herbal tea. "Big day," he said, handing her one. Kira nodded, sitting on the edge of her bed. "I used to think no one would ever want me," she said quietly. "Not as a partner, not as a friend, not even as a person." Jake sat across from her. "Why?" "Because that's what I was told, over and over," she replied. "Too tall, too serious, too different. Not soft enough, not pretty enough, not, Jake leaned forward. "They were wrong," he said. "But you don't need me to say it anymore, do you?" She looked at him, and this time, She smiled, not the nervous smile she wore before, but a real one, one filled with light. "No," she said. "I finally believe it myself." The ship lifted off with a gentle hum, the planet below shrinking. As stars filled the windows, Kira stood at the observation deck. Watching her world become a small light in the distance, she didn't feel like she was leaving something behind. She felt like she was moving toward something new. Weeks later, she walked through the Earth Embassy in New Geneva. Humans from across the system gathered to hear her speak. A young girl in the front row asked, "How did you become brave?" Kira smiled gently. "I wasn't always brave," she said. "I was quiet, afraid, alone. But I learned something powerful." She paused, letting the silence hold. "You don't need to be chosen by others to have value. You need to choose yourself first." Applause followed, but it wasn't the noise that filled her heart. It was peace. That evening, she sat in her quarters sketching again. This time, she drew not just stars and ships, but faces, laughing children, bold women, humans and Varelli working side by side. Her past didn't disappear, but it no longer controlled her. Jake knocked on the doorframe. "Busy?" he asked. Kira looked up. "Not too busy for you." He walked in, looked over her shoulder at the drawing, and nodded. "You're not the girl no one chose anymore," he said. Kira smiled wider. "No," she replied. "Now, I'm the woman who chose herself." They stood together, looking out the window as Earth's moon rose over the horizon, quiet and full. Her journey had been hard, filled with pain and questions, but it led her to this moment, and for the first time ever, Kira didn't wonder if she was enough. She knew it.